Okay, so we just had showers overnight. Had to wait about an hour, delayed my ride because it was raining pretty good. Showers just passed through. Hit some brush here. Most people would just ride right by it. But when the branches, you probably can't tell, but there's water. Whenever the brush is laden with water after a rain, trails are miserable to ride. We call them car wash because you just get soaked if you're the point lead rider. Anytime you go with an experienced rider following a rainstorm and first tracks, guess what that experienced rider is going to do? He's going to ride last, and all you inexperienced riders are going to get put out on point. And every time you run into the brush, you're going to feel like buckets of water are just being thrown in your lap. So when you've ridden a brush trail following a rainstorm, you don't get soaked by the vegetation. The trail has a lot more flow to it. It's a lot more fun. But again, the big problem is getting folks out to do brush, or even just, when they're bucking a log to whack the brush in the vicinity of that downfall. It makes a huge difference when, if you have 30 trees and you do 20 yards of brush on either side of the log that you just cut, that's 40 yards, and you got 30 trees, 40 yards, you do the math. It makes a difference when, in the spring and the fall, or every time a tree falls, somebody whacks the brush around that downfall. But generally speaking, we wait till the trails close in. We don't get this little stuff like this. That big log gets hidden, and then somebody breaks their foot because the log is kind of cut close to the trail, and then the brush obscures and kind of pushes them to that line. Just encouraging you, if you're out there volunteering, whack the brush whenever you pop off to, buck a log. So am I going to cut everything today? No way. I'm just one person. But this is where you can make this fun and cover a lot of ground if you have several people, and then you, just like bucking logs, you just leapfrog. You go up 100 yards, you start bucking to the next guy. The next guy comes back towards you, or cuts forward, and you just leapfrog. You get all the brush whacked. And when you have a good group just leapfrogging, you doing 100 yards, me doing 100 yards, and several other people doing 100 yards, and you leapfrog all day, you can get a lot of trail brush. My general experience though is it only takes one guy to not leapfrog and just take off to the next down tree, and then pass 4,000 yards of brush, and then be up there upset, where's his group? Well, his group's back there working their tails off, brushing the trail. And stuff like this. Sure, I can ride right by stuff, and there'll be stuff today that I ride right by, just because I'm trying to get to the worst of it. But I'll just dress up some of this, and anyways, my point is it's so easy just to ride by this stuff, and then what happens is this gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and then all of a sudden, because you just ride through the car wash year after year and you don't knock it back, all of a sudden it's the entire length of the trail that's brushed in to the point it's not even rideable. And a lot of people are perfectly okay with that because they're a one and done kind of rider. It's it's a bucket list. They're here once on a vacation. They don't help. They just get their week of riding in and leave. It's one of the difficulties of a destination ride, a bucket list ride, is certain areas become bucket list destinations, and people from all over the world want to come ride those destinations. And trails have what's called a carrying capacity. Once you exceed that carrying capacity, there's a huge impact to those trails. And then these, the folks that never help, they get upset when the locals, the folks that have to go to the meetings, the folks that work with the Forest Service, the folks that volunteer huge amounts of time to keep trails open, they act like it's some possessive thing, you know, that these folks don't want you here. No, they want you to ride responsibly, meaning don't go around the downfall, have a saw in your group, you know, contribute, give back, help. That's the thank you. You know, writing a check to some org like Blue Ribbon. Blue Ribbon doesn't do jack squat here on any of these trails. So to say that, oh, well, I support, you know, this XYZ, you know, org, it's usually individual volunteers that do the lion's share that are out on a, you know, the most frequent basis. And then you have your club members. But even in clubs, you have the doers and you have the hanger-ons that just do a minimal amount. They'll show up to a work project, which is appreciated. Don't, you know, you can read that as negative. But, you know, anybody doing what they can and contributing is what I'm, you know, encouraging, not trying to berate or be negative. But the point is, though, is you have the guys that step up big time. They're in the minority. The folks that are willing to come out and do a organized volunteer project, they're in the minority. And then the rest of you are in a huge majority, because most folks don't do jack diddly squat. Again, I could have rode right by, and I will ride by a bunch of this stuff, but my point, doesn't that look a lot better? And if this is all laden in water from a rain or snow, and you come out to ride the trail, instead of getting soaked by the vegetation, your trail has some flow. Isn't that a good thing? I think it is. And to all of you that, you know, step up and help and whack a little bit of this stuff, no matter how little, you know, it's appreciated. It does make a difference. And notice I don't just trim it like a hedge. Problem with trimming it like a hedge, that's a complete waste of time. Brush grows and you just spur growth. When you're dealing with brush, you just whack it completely back, just right down to the base. You don't trim it. So all these clubs that get these hand tools and, you know, brush trimmers to go just make it, you know, oh, we don't want to make the trail wide, you know, we just trim off the face slappers. That's a complete waste of time when it comes to brush. You're literally making the problem worse, not you know, fixing anything when you use those little hand trimmers, you know. Okay, so probably don't even notice. Cut all the brush back, cut it back there. Anyways, it just makes the trail flow. You can see the logs, they get exposed. And like I said, you don't have the car wash, you don't have, it improves your sight line. So if there's a fellow user, dirt bike, a mountain bike, e-bike, horse, you know, hiker on this motorized multiple use trail, your sight lines are just improved. And when it comes to a bad encounter, if you just have a second quicker, you know, reaction time because you can see, it's the difference of, you know, pissing somebody off or stopping in time. It doesn't take very much, you know, to shorten up your stopping distance and be courteous to your fellow user. Okay, these are, you know, you got outsloping, but these are outlets. So this is hand dug. So every year, trail rangers, you know, Conservation Corps, they're out doing these, you know, water release points to make sure water doesn't flow down the trail but has opportunity to come off. This trail has some grade reversals in it too, which provides opportunities for the water to come off. And a grade reversal is just where the trail rises and falls, and every time the trail, as you're ascending the trail, where the trail kind of descends a little bit and then starts to rise again, that's a grade reversal. So the water flowing down the trail will hit that grade reversal where the trail rises and will bleed off the trail, which preserves your trail. So anyways, that's hand dug. So you don't want to destroy these, you know. Some clubs will come out too and do water, you know, mitigation work like this to clean out these things so that the water can't follow the trail. You know, if anytime you see water on the trail, you know, if you kick a relief, you know, in just with your boot, just to kick it so that the water crosses the trail instead of follows the trail, and then put like a rock, a bigger rock in the trail so that it diverts the water to, you know, whatever you kick the hole in the rut. You know, whatever you can do to keep the water off the trail is, you know, a good thing, instead of letting it flow and gain, you know, in a heavy weather event. When water gets speed and volume, that's when the real damage to a trail occurs. Okay, so I'm going to point this out too. A lot of people think this is a switchback. The trail's right there. These wider radius turns are called climbing turns. They're more popular because the least skilled riders can ride around them, where switchback is more of a V with a landing out on the end of the V. And those take more technique. What always amazes me is so-called good riders. They come out and they ride a switchback, and they got to cut them. They got to dive off the slope here, over there. They just go off the slope and cut the switchback. Yet they want to be identified, and they look at me, I'm such a badass, you know, I'm a great rider. You know, if you can't negotiate a simple switchback and you got to cut the turn. So here's another one. Somebody came up here with a dirt tool. And this is labor, this is work. This is what the Megan Griffiths of the world and the promoter people that, you know, promote their paid rides on public land, the ones that don't give back by getting out and putting blood, sweat, and tears into the trails, volunteering, helping the volunteer groups that keep areas open. This is what they don't understand, is the huge amount of labor that goes in to keeping trails open, whether it's from the advocacy side, you know, going to the meetings, writing the letters, creating the relationships with the land managers, visiting with them, going on hikes with land managers, all of that. The out-of-town ride promoter doesn't see it. Now, like this is because of many riders cutting the turn, okay? This used to be a legit switchback that came out here, and the good riders would come up to the bank like this, roll back, and they would go. But over time, with all of you destination, out of state, even local riders that have no skills, you cut the corner, and then that becomes the main line. But the problem is the water now follows that, and then follows down the trail, unless somebody comes out here with a dirt tool and it creates water releases, you know, places where the water can flow off. That's going to allow water to follow your trail. Where when the trail came out to where I'm at and didn't cut the corner like that, the water would go into the slope and not follow the trail. So you can see everybody is quick to cut the corner, and then they dig a rut because they've killed their momentum. They got to spin the tire, they hit the little root, and then that becomes a deeper and deeper rut, which demands somebody to come out with a tool and fix it. You know, hauling dirt tools in, whether you're walking them in or riding them in, and then getting off and swinging a dirt tool, it's a ton of work. And so, you know, responsible riders appreciate that, and they don't create more work for volunteers or contract crews or what few trail crews we have left in the U.S. Forest Service. You know, and I'm talking, you know, public lands riding. So, you know, you don't want to help. Okay, I get it. That's fine. You got one day a year, and that's the only day you can come out. You know, I don't expect you to volunteer, but the way you ride, your behavior, you can mitigate a lot of things by not brake sliding, by not spinning your tire and then digging a trench on a root or a rock and turning it into a big obstacle because you spun. And remember, just this little bit here, it looks like nothing, but it's the water, it's the rain, it's the runoff that follows that track that you dug, that does the real damage after you've left. So, you know, tread lightly and minimize your impact when you trail ride. You know, guys like Graham Jarvis go smoking fast, but they're not negatively impacting the trail. You know, they're not sitting there seeing how fast they can get their wheel to spin on a public lands trail. They're rolling. They're carrying momentum. They're light on the brakes. They carry speed through the apex of the turn. Roll speed is it. They're looking far ahead. That's how you become a great rider. Sitting there and digging a trench, you're not a great rider at all, and there's no purpose. You're just wearing yourself out, huffing and puffing, pushing and lifting and spinning, and severely impacting the trail. That's what trail volunteers are encouraging you not to do, is just ride respectful of the trail. Here's another water relief coming out of a switchback. This one's almost it's so close to a climbing turn. Basically, anytime a trail or a turn like this gets wider than about an 8-foot 16-foot diameter, 8-foot radius from the apex, you're not really dealing with a switchback. And a lot of guys that ride these days think all of these rounded turns are switchbacks. They have no clue when they get on a real trail with real switchbacks, because they've never ridden a real switchback. They just ride climbing turns. They're just more rounded radius turns that can work on less steep terrain. But when you get into when you're riding real switchbacks, you're dealing with super steep. But I'm not pointing out all these water reliefs, but my point is there's a whole bunch of them, and somebody had to hike in here or stop and pull out a dirt tool and dig that water relief. But that makes a huge difference. So when you go ahead and cut that turn, now what you're doing is you're directing the water down your track and back onto the trail, instead of being able to come out the relief here and not ever getting speed or volume. So that's why it's so important to stay on the trail. So let's say I'm leading a pay group up here, illegal pay group, my paid client guest list, whatever you want to call them, people for instruction. They're coming up behind me. I can park my bike. This could hurt somebody. It could knock them off the trail. It could break their foot. They don't even need a saw. They could move this, okay? And then they could walk back to that turn, and the persons that can negotiate the turn without issue would line up right here and wait. And then the person that has some struggle, is on the struggle bus, you could help them, whether you're a guide or a riding instructor. But the reality is these people are getting paid, and they're not giving back to the trail. So the issues that we're even talking about, they don't even recognize. All you got to do is take a look at where a person like Megan Griffiths grew up riding, okay? That area up there in British Columbia, those trails are just destroyed. But by her, perception, because that's the area she learned in, the harder the better, and the more unsustainable the route is, the better. And that's her perception of trail riding, is this whole hard enduro BS. And, there's no concept of sustainable use and maintaining the routes and minimizing one's impact to the trail tread. That's not even in their way of thinking, because ride it one and done and move on. So what if it gets destroyed? I'm not coming back. It's the attitude, and it's like Megan, she comes to the United States to do her classes. Why didn't she stay up there in British Columbia and do her classes up there and just live up there? Those trails are hammered. There's very few people that would be in need of a riding class and instruction that would be willing to pay, that could go on those trails, because they're beat. So, the whole class would have to be done on roads, because the entry-level rider that needs instruction isn't going to be on side hill country like this. You're just begging to get them in big trouble if you don't first, give them some mountain skills. There's a bad spot right here with brush. I'm going to whack that, and then I'm going to get some of this stuff all the way up. But this is not a one-man job. I have cleared the trail. I start in April. I've cleared the trail up to snow every year for many, many years. And, you know, these are the things where you have a big group and you tell them there's brush. The trail's bucked up to the snow line. You know, go whack the brush. It really depends on who the group leader is. They're tasked with coming and brushing, but this has been tasked by 2 different clubs with significant groups of volunteers. And each year, they report back that this is taken care of. Well, these logs are in the trail. They've been there for a while. That brush, that's what's been left. You know, the whole point of bucking up to the snow line is to allow a big group to come in here and take care of this stuff, you know, when it's still cool and you got the snow just above us. And it's not so you can just ride through. And it's so frustrating. I have people, you know, that subscribe to Off-Road Rider. They join these clubs and they talk about coming and helping. And they're the very people that, oh, there was nothing to do. There was nothing to buck. I just rode through. You know, it was all cleared. You know, thanks for clearing it all earlier. No, you just chose to ride right past all these different places that was the whole idea of the group project, is to come up and clean this kind of stuff up. But it's me, the guy that, you know, comes early and bucks in April and May and June and July and August, September and October, that bucks every single ride, that none of you guys want to come help, you know, that has to come back and clear this up. Here we got a cool day in August. Crazy to have a, you know, 50 to 60 degree day up here in August. Yet where are the volunteers? You know, they're nowhere to be seen. We could have 30 people out here and attack this stuff on a nice cool day like this and get it all cleaned up. But it's, you know, one 67-year-old dude, and then I'm not supposed to be frustrated. So when I arrived, it was raining pretty hard. It was all dark clouds. You couldn't even see the mountaintops. Beautiful day. Nobody would come. So I'm out here working by myself, which is my normal, you know, MO, but taking advantage of the coolness. That's kind of why I come up in April too, is you can, you know, on these cool days, all this low stuff that you just want to ride through and get to the top because it's so bloody hot. If you got a day where it's just going to get up into the, you know, upper 60s, low 70s for a high, you want to get out here and attack this stuff. But, oh, it's raining. You know, I got all these other things to do. You know, it's typical. I just want to wait till the fall. But then when fall comes, you know, it's hunting. Trails are closed with seasonal restrictions to motorized use. You know, so this is kind of when you got to get out here. So there was multiple things you can't even see once I clean them up. I walked all the way up to right here, and it could hurt somebody. So I cut them all out of the way, and now the things that could break somebody's foot or hurt somebody's arm, they're all cleaned up. So stuff like that. Sure, I don't need to stop and clear that. I can go right by it. But think if that moves 6 inches, you know, and down into the trail, and your buddy's following in the dust. That one up there. So your guy wants to follow you, you know, wheel suck you, and he hits that. Your day's over. You're going to the hospital. You know, even a guy with a handsaw can clean that up. But the reality is even the guy with the handsaw, they're on a mission, you know, to get somewhere, and their attitude would be, I can get by that, and they'll ride right by it. And then as this moves into the trail over time, that one slides down a little bit, somebody's in the dust, somebody goes to the hospital, yet dozens and dozens of people rode right by it. It's like, why not just clean it up as respect to your fellow rider? Okay, so I cut both of them right there. Heck, a good distance from the trail. now they can't hurt anybody. At some point that'll slip down and it'll have to be dealt with, but it's still safe. So I've stopped and fixed and blocked and put the trail back up on here many times over the last 10 years. And now look at this turn, it's just completely blown out. And it's just so unnecessary because it's the same thing. The people take it tighter and tighter. Now it's way in there, but now it's a steeper and steeper bank. They're spinning the whole way. And now you got a mess. And then that catches water and it sends water down the trail instead of the water just dispersing off the trail all along the route. It gets channeled into that and it builds up speed, and anyways, it just creates a bigger mess. So it's just sad, you know, and it's just totally irresponsible, you know, riders, and these will be riders that think they're good, you know, and oh, I can climb that too and wheel spin my way right up it, but you're just blowing out the switchback. The turn is out here. You just do a 3-point turn and you go up. Now this is pretty off camber with a lot of you know, decomposed granite on it, so at this point, with it being this blown out, I don't even know if I can get across there. Most likely my rear wheel will step out and I'll be just like everybody else, getting sucked down there. Chainsaw and I'm 67 years old. How come I can do that and not blow the turn out? I'm not even riding faster, you know. But those are skills that a riding coach should be able to teach. But no, the riding coach will teach you how to blow the turn out. You know, cut it. Instead of how to negotiate it. So like right here, again, this is what the clubs were supposed to and reported they took care of. So the brush is so thick, it's pushing people right off the trail. So anyways, I'm gonna move forward and I'll walk back and fix all this. I don't know if you can see that, but the log was cut, probably slid, you know, over multiple winters, and now the brush is growing up, and it's in the trail. And yeah, all of us, we can all ride by it. I can ride by it, but why have somebody lose their foot or an ankle or lower leg? Even a handsaw can cut that. You're up here, your buddies are coming up behind you. You know, you're in a group. Why can't you stop and fix that so it's not somebody in your group or the next group? So here's another one of those things. We can all get by that. But all it has to do is move this way another half a foot and it's going to take somebody's arm out, or maybe an eye on a smaller bike. Or anyways, going this direction, it's no problem. You just rub it. Coming that way, if it moves, you know, gets rolled by the snow down a little more, it's going to hurt somebody. So clean it up. You're waiting for your buddies anyway, so why not, when you see something dangerous, fix it? And you got a handsaw, you can handsaw that out and clean up something that's dangerous. So look at that one. This side you can see it, but coming the other way you don't see it at all. That's why you got to cut it further back. That was so badly rotten, I just moved it through it. Didn't even need the saw, but could have hurt somebody's foot. So this is a switchback. Guys come flying up here and they just go up that bank, and then the turn is right here. But they don't look ahead. They chase somebody else's tracks. And then they come back on the trail right in here. So we're going to take care of this. But look, you got the brush. If you're coming the other way, right? And I'm going to walk right here. We're going to clear this out. All right, so this is what you're looking at, right? See all that brush? Trail down there, brush, and then right at eye level on the bike, you got that in the trail bed. I don't know if you can see it, but that can really hurt somebody. So flash flooding is in the forecast. Got these clouds moving in. Just whacked back the brush. Got rid of a couple of logs that could break a foot. Got rid of the jabber that could have taken out somebody's eye, hiding behind the bush. Got that all cleaned up. Again, I'm not hitting everything on this trail. I'm just hitting bad spots. There's a lot more work to be done. But I'm one person and I need help. And I'm evil for suggesting that. And the few that do help, that come out and do like me on their own and hit a few spots, you guys are awesome. And the guys that show up to the work projects, you're awesome. And you got out-of-state groups that come and have a saw in your group and use it, you're awesome. Those of you that use saws just to make a destination, like the Grit, encouraging people to come on their bucket list rides, bring a saw, big miles. The reality is you cut what you absolutely have to cut because you got a time limit and you got big mileage and you're hauling stuff. You're the ultimate in irresponsible. You get tired, you got to drag your bikes back on the trail. You're not clearing the trail. You just got a saw for the photo op to get through. Now, there are some exceptions. I know the guys that do come out and put in big days to clear an area. You guys are not what I'm talking about. But I am talking about the guys that get a bucket list ride, think the trails are cleared, come out, think it's all going to be fun and games and just have to cut a couple of trees. And then they get into reality. The trails are way harder than the photos. The terrain is way slower. They think, 80 miles of trail in a day, no problem. And they get here and they got to cut 40 trees, so they end up cutting the 3 that they have to, and they go around the other 37. You guys. Because what forces you from being responsible is when you're part of those rides, the Grit and the Tour of Idaho. In order to be a finisher and a hero, you got a time distance deal. So you've got a constraint that you got to cover so many miles and get to these different points. Well, if one group comes through the day after someone cleared it, and that very night a storm like this rolls through and the wind picks up, and 30 trees drop tonight after I just went through here, the group tomorrow is not a zero because they couldn't get through or they had to tap out, because they were trying to make the time distance and they couldn't. It's just absurd. If you get lucky and you follow someone that's cleared a trail and you can do big miles, hey, good for you. I've done that many times. It's fantastic. But to have the constraint of trying to make a destination, carrying a saw, and trying to be an honored hero for making it to the destination on time, when you have the 30 trees on a trail, and then to start going around them because you got to get there to finish, you're irresponsible. you're grossly irresponsible, you know? So that's why I don't like the Grit. I don't like the Tour of Idaho when it was going on. You get guys all amped up on a bucket list ride. They get false, you know, thinking that, you know, it's all cleared and they can go ride multiple days in Idaho. Well, Idaho, we got all these dead trees. There's no such thing as a cleared trail. And if you happen to get lucky and follow a saw that went through and did clear it the day before you, or, you know, even a few days before, and you only have 1 or 2 trees, you're getting a whole different experience than the guy that has a big windstorm last night and is trying to stay on schedule, you know. And I'm not saying don't come to Idaho, but forget these stupid things where you have a time distance thing. Every trail, the same trail can be different depending on how many trees fell the night before. So be responsible and be prepared to cut them and not use your saw to go around everything and cut go-arounds. That's the height of irresponsibility. So just another example of a switchback. I don't even know how many switchbacks are on this trail, but there's a lot. It's cut back so you can go out here, make your turn. But look at the apex of the turn was up here. That's what, 8 feet, 10 feet? And people were even cutting it further until that little log was put there. Another one of those water reliefs that somebody had to hand dig. Yep, I can get through, just like, but we're gonna whack it. Okay, so while I was clearing 4 guys on the Grit, every day trees fall in these dead areas. You gotta have a chainsaw, but you don't have time to stop and clear stuff either. So you bring extra bodies and you go around everything you can get around, and you go over and you bring a handsaw to limb the tree so that you can throw the bikes over stuff, and you throw the bike over, or the stuff you can't wheelie over. So you do the buddy thing and 4-man dragging the bike over. It's no different than any of these outside tour companies. It's no different than the Tour of Idaho. Handing out a map and telling people, that it's all good for them to go and have the adventure of a lifetime, and then people have to tap out or come in after dark, be late for their motel reservation. The restaurants are closed because they get into town too late because the trail's not cleared. I'm sorry, that promoter is a crook. But those guys that share the maps and tell you, y'all come, do your bucket list ride, they're loved. And those of us that are out here doing the hard labor to keep trails open, we're hated. And we go to the meetings, the land use meetings, we participate in club projects, we're out here by ourselves, do a little so that we can all go ride. And if everybody did a little bit, we can keep all these trails plus the hiking trails open. But no, we just go make a mess of it because we have a time distance deal. We got to get to the hotel. We got to get to a town. We got to, and of course, there'll be no appreciation for those of us that get out here and make it all possible. The guys doing the hard labor. It sits for a TVTMA or some nameless volunteer. So they got about section of brush that I rode by that I'm gonna whack. Telling anybody not to come. What I'm trying to say is be prepared, be a good Boy Scout. You know, show up with chainsaws in your group, show up with chainsaws in your truck, at your RV, and if you go out and you find cleared trails, you know, have a ball. What I'm trying to say, but if you're finding trees down, then give back and clear, you know, something. And if you don't want to clear, then just turn around. But don't go through. Is that they hand out these maps and the guys come to ride and they've got their hotel and then they encounter the downfall and they're not prepared. And they show up late, they miss dinner, they tap out. Somebody goes off the side of the trail, gets hurt. You know, I'm encouraging you to come ride, but just come prepared for what's out here. You're riding through a burn area, you need a saw in your group, and you need to be prepared to use it. And anyways, hard to have this conversation riding these types of trails. Yeah, this is the section I wanted to whack. It's only a few feet, but so do you think any of these folks that come on these, you know, the grit ride or you know, with a coach or with a, you know, a tour guide, you think they're all stopping and whacking out the brush on a paid ride? No. That's why they ride with hand saws. The hand saw, so they do a minimalist job to cut their way around stuff. Cut some limbs off so that they can go over. So I caught up to these guys even stopping and cutting all that brush out. I was probably 20 minutes behind them.